They called it justice, it was just ink. A single decree promised to end the chaos of the English succession, and in the process erased heirs with the coldness of a legal line. There was no blood in the Parliament Hall. There were words that turned princes into nobodies. Today we open the document that history remembers as the Titulus Regius, 1483-1484, and ask, was it law, or a convenient caption bound as law? England, 1483. Edward IV, 1442-1483, King of England, head of the House of York, victor of the Wars of the Roses in their decisive phases, leaving as heir a boy, Edward, Prince of Wales, the future Edward V, an adolescent heir, placed under the guardianship of his uncle until the coronation. The uncle is Richard, Duke of Gloucester, later Richard III, 1452-1485, the respected commander and administrator in the north. He becomes Lord Protector during his nephew's minority. Around him, a divided court, the family of the Queen Dowager Elizabeth Woodville, a gentry, noblewoman elevated to queen. Her ascension generated resentment, and the veteran Yorkists aligned with Gloucester. At the center of the labyrinth, two boys, Edward V and his brother Richard, Duke of York, the Princes in the Tower, and later memoirs. Before the crown finds its head, a legal argument arises that is as simple as it is devastating. Edward IV's children would be bastards because of a pre-contract marriage. Who presented the key? Robert Stillington, Bishop of Bath and Wells, a prelate of the kingdom, jurist and former chancellor. He claimed to know of a previous marriage betrothal of Edward IV to Eleanor Butler nee Talbot, a noble widow of respected lineage. If the claim is true, the subsequent marriage to Elizabeth Woodville would be invalid, and all the couple's children illegitimate. The rest, Parliament jurists and seals, would follow the trail opened by a story told as proof. The Titulus Regency, the title of the king, promised order, to declare the sons of Edward IV illegitimate and to summon Richard as the legitimate heir. But what sustained the law? Paper, testimony, and carefully drafted clauses. Was it a sincere discovery of an old error, or legal engineering in times of crisis? Let's read the text, the names that support it, and the immediate gains of those who promulgated it. The weight of the Titulus Regius did not come from a miraculous parchment presented at the table, but from institutional convergence, council, legal clergy, and a parliament ready to give legal form to a simple thesis. The text circulates as a public act, read, copied, incorporated into the rolls. From that point on, what was previously an allegation becomes a criterion. If Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville is null due to a pre-contract with Eleanor Butler, then Edward V and his siblings cannot inherit. The proof? The decree speaks of public fame and referred testimonies, not preserved as an appendix. This does not make it any less effective. On the contrary, by clothing the allegation with the voice of the kingdom, the document creates legal reality. And in 1483, legal reality mobilizes guards, crowns, and taxes. Why does a decree work better than a sword in a succession crisis? Because order depends on predictability, and those in power need visible consistency. A text like Titulus Regius does three things at once. It standardizes the discourse. It gives everyone, judges, sheriffs, stewards, the same story to repeat. It rewrites the recent past. It turns a celebrated marriage into nothing without spilling ink on duels or contradictory proclamations. It signs the future. It establishes who is king now and why, with language that seems technical and therefore neutral. There is also the architecture of obedience. When Parliament speaks, officials obey. When officials obey, neighbors align. When neighbors align, critics whisper. This does not mean consensus, it means momentum. And momentum, in 1483, is what separates proclamation from civil war. The mechanism has a dark side. Perfect decrees can fail if they don't stick in the minds of those who need to comply with them. Therefore, the text invests in public morality. It claims that the new arrangement saves the kingdom from a scandal of illegitimacy and a government under undue influence. Follow the incentive. With the Titulus Regius, Richard of Gloucester ceases to be protector and becomes king by a line of legality. This gives him full access to the Big Seal, the appointment of officers, the distribution of land, and, above all, control of the narrative. The Yorkists who support him also win, an order that prevents the return of Woodville alliances, the possibility of confirming past donations to allies, and the rearrangement of marriages and regency. Utility and truth can coincide or simply walk hand in hand as long as it is convenient. The decree crystallizes this utility into law, and the law for a time crystallizes loyalties. Look where the ink flows. With the Titulus Regius, Richard III's pen authorizes appointments, tenures are confirmed, and incomes are redistributed. The effect is cumulative. A decree solves today and compromises tomorrow. Whoever receives it today comes to defend the history that made them receive it. Veteran Yorkists gain predictability. The Woodvilles lose traction. The official discourse stabilizes. It is not a coup. It is the correction of an old mistake. The text also falls silent. By declaring Edward IV's children with Elizabeth Woodville illegitimate, the decree transforms a family into a legal hypothesis. The personal fate of the boys, the subject of another controversy, is outside the scope of the document. However, it remains as a narrative shadow that will demand a moral answer from the law in the future. What happens when history changes narrator? In 1485, after Bosworth, Henry Tudor ascended as Henry VII. His first task was to undo the narrative that had hindered him, the titulus regius. The new parliament revoked the text and ordered all copies to be destroyed. Where there had previously been legal certainty, there was now legal silence, and with it, a new line of legitimacy. Paradoxically, the attempt to erase the decree does not make it any less historical. The text survives through full quotations and transcriptions in later compilations, and in authors who mention it when discussing the period. The institutional lesson is clear. The law can write reality, but it cannot unwrite memory. Practical consequences: redistribution of favors and offices under the new sovereign, symbolic rehabilitation of Edward IV's children as far as possible without reopening legal wounds, stigmatization of the decree as a political artifact of a defeated reign and not as lasting jurisprudence. The titulus regius became a symbol of how much a clause can move armies without raising blades. For some, it was legal engineering in the service of Richard III. For others, a sincere regularization of a vice that time had concealed. The archive does not give us the missing piece, the direct and uncontroversial proof of the pre-contract with Eleanor Butler, but it shows us what the law did with its affirmation. It reorganized the kingdom. In public memory, the decree lives between two forces, the law that proclaimed it and the law that erased it. In critical study, it lives where history usually survives, in copies, accounts, and contradictions. Art reading remains conservative. To follow the text, the names, the gains, and to remember that in 1483 to 1485, truthfulness and utility walked side by side, sometimes as allies, sometimes as shadows. If a decree can rewrite the succession, what can a private letter do to a queen? In the next episode, The Necklace That Ruined a Queen, Paris, 1785, we will follow forged signatures, forged letters, and a reputation that paid the price. If you want court scandals told like Dossier's document, mechanism, motive, consequence, and legacy, subscribe and check out the playlist.